Welcome to Who Killed Haing Ngor. I've come to Taiwan to see if there are any leads to be found on the murder of Haing Ngor. What caught my attention were the broad parallels between the murder of Ngor, who was gunned down in the carport of his building, and the murder of Henry Liu. He was a Taiwanese dissident in exile in California, shot dead in his garage in 1984. Both were prominent Asian Americans. Both were living in California. One of the men enlisted to assassinate Henry Liu was Chen Chi-li, the spiritual leader of a triad called United Bamboo, or the Bamboo Union. He's still remembered with reverence by some, or for his notoriety to others. What really caught my eye was that in 1996, when Ngor was in financial trouble, Chen Chi-li moved to Cambodia, where it turns out the Bamboo Union had already taken root. My name is Patricia Noonan, and this is Who Killed Haing Ngor. Cambodia in the early to mid-1990s was an extraordinary moment in time, especially for me, just starting out in my journalism career. History was happening all around us. United Nations peacekeepers were trying to end a civil war that had started before I was born, one entangled with the mythology of the Vietnam War. The UN mission was called UNTAC, and as I've said before, during UNTAC, we were fixated on UNTAC. Would the peace deal collapse? Would democratic elections be a success? Would the UN withdraw or get bogged down in country for years? But there was a lot going on outside the UNTAC lens. Now, no doubt some of my colleagues were much savvier than I was in my 20s. Still, my overall sense is we missed a lot. My take on organized crime is they're just as entrepreneurial as the legal economy. So in the 1990s, Cambodia is opening up after UNTAC and there's peace breaking out. So that's prime territory for organized crime groups as well as formal foreign investors. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. I think particularly in the Asia region, and I think it's probably across the board, but these people are business people at heart. It's just they're business people who play by their own creed.
Jason Tower is a transnational organized crime expert at the United States Institute of Peace, based in Bangkok, Thailand.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking at criminal markets as just that, as markets, and they're going to navigate to the ones that are most lucrative.
Chen Chi-li moved to Cambodia in 1996, the same year Haing Ngor was murdered. Since he was a founding member of the Bamboo Union, my hunch was he'd only moved somewhere that the triad was already operational. After some hunting, Taiwanese journalist Jonah Q and I connected with someone who had studied Bamboo Union activities in Cambodia in the 1990s, Professor Chiang-Ping Wu of Ming Chuan University in Taipei. He's an organized crime expert. Professor Chiang confirmed my suspicions, much to my relief.
A lot of gangs develop organized crime in Cambodia, Taiwanese gangs. So that's why Chen Chi-li went there. We have a theory in criminology. They'll flee to somewhere with support. They won't go to anywhere without support. So Chen Chi-li went to Cambodia and expanded the organization there.
I can't be sure Chen Chi-li and Haing Ngor ever met. I haven't been able to find an exact date for when Chen Chi-li arrived in Phnom Penh. Most accounts simply say 1996. Ngor had left Cambodia around February 13, 1996, to go back to Los Angeles. He'd been asked back to do post-production work on a film. He was killed soon thereafter, on February 25, 1996. So those first weeks of 1996 seem like a pretty small window for Chen Chi-li and Ngor to have personally connected. But what we know is that in late 1995 and into 1996, Ngor had serious problems with money. In mid-1995, he got a windfall of cash from an IBM commercial he did, in which he played a Buddhist monk. One of his agents told me that Ngor may have earned as much as $1 million from that commercial. Even if it wasn't that high, it was still a significant sum. $500,000 $1995 is more than $1 million today. Still, Ngor was struggling to launch a sawmill he'd bought. He had an outstanding $33,000 loan in the U.S., according to probate documents. He took out about $50,000 in loans in his girlfriend's name, according to his friend Cece. We heard from her in the Old Friends episode last season. Together, that's $187,000 in debt in 2026 terms. The Bamboo Union got started in the money game as soon as they ventured into Cambodia, according to Professor Chiang.
Before Chen Chi Lee's arrival, they already had good relations with the Cambodian police through debt collections.
The Bamboo Union were loan sharks for corrupt elements within the Cambodian police who were running protection rackets. From there, they went on to loan sharking from their own funds and small-scale money laundering, using silver shops as a cover.
With the jewelry, it doesn't really matter if it's gold or silver, because the real issue is they're using all these stores to send money to China or Taiwan. So, for example, sometimes they were money laundering through silver stores, sending money to 5 or 6 different banks in China. Then they get laundered money back to Cambodia.
A few months after I had met with Professor Chiang, I was back in Cambodia. It was April 2025. Suddenly I noticed all the silver shops. There's a strip of them in central Phnom Penh between the National Museum and Wat Unalum, which is that picturesque Wat a block or two north overlooking the river. They sell everything from bracelets to jewelry boxes to trays etched with images of Angkor Wat. I have no idea if those shops were used by triads, but you can tell by the signs and the way the phone numbers are written on them that they've been there for years. That meshes with something I heard from a veteran American aid worker, Linda McKinney, who spent more than 20 years in Cambodia. How ordinary Cambodians would get scammed.
The loan system at that time was centered on the market entrepreneurs that were there, often the guys who had the jewelry stands and such in the market. They would double by lending money or acquiring property and lending money to the property owner and then setting it up so that they didn't have a chance at paying it off and eventually wind up with the property. That was a widespread scam because there weren't any standards. There wasn't anything, no guide rails, nothing to prohibit you trying to make your fortune. There was nothing holding you back other than if you pissed off the big man. That was the only thing that could possibly dissuade you. And that's the Wild Wild West feature, isn't it?
Back in Taipei, I had one more question for Professor Chiang. Well, let's say, could Bamboo Union in Cambodia order a murder in Los Angeles?
他说：“那请问，在柬埔寨的……
对，但是如果不是很严重，他们也不会做这件事的。帮道义有道。”
They definitely could, he says, but they might not.
Even among thieves, there is a code of honor. I've noticed that the older generation of gangsters, the old-timers, weren't like the younger crowd, who are quick to pull a gun at the slightest provocation. The old guard, they were the type to settle things through reason.
It was great to connect with Professor Chiang. Still, my trip to Taiwan was pretty slow going. There's a lot of information out there about the Bamboo Union in Cambodia, but most of it, the vast, vast majority of it, starts in the 2000s, after Ngor was dead. The Innocence Center and I are looking into the suspect we call Larry. He's a Singaporean who, Ngor's secretary said, represented a small group of investors. Larry and Ngor had a business agreement about a bank license. But when that deal went sour, Larry threatened Ngor's life, saying he knew professional killers. Looking into the assassination of Henry Liu, I discovered the Bamboo Union had a track record of going after people in the United States. The Liu plot was successful. A second plot was aborted. So was Larry with the Bamboo Union? Or was he friends with someone who was? Finally, Jonah got a tip. We could meet a Bamboo Union member with 1990s Cambodia experience. Maybe he'd know something about who Ngor was associating with. We'll get to that in a minute, but first we have to talk about something else. Pig butchering. Pig butchering is an online scam. You know those weird text messages you get from some unknown number with someone who just wants to chat? That's often how it starts. Scammers use fake identities to start online conversations with people. Over time, they build friendships or even romances with their targets. This is fattening up a pig. Once someone is hooked on the relationship, the scammer plans the slaughter. Maybe they share an investment opportunity, often in crypto. Or there's an emergency, someone needs surgery or an airfare. Too often, the target's been hooked on the romance or the promise of one. Once they send money, the pig is butchered and the scammers disappear. Innocent people lose staggering amounts of money. U.S. citizens alone lost $3.5 billion in 2023, according to the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee. The scammers having these online chats are often victims of human trafficking. Often, a young person is deceived by an offer of a high-paying job advertised on social media. Taking that job often means crossing an international border. Then they fall prey to criminal networks. They end up imprisoned in detention centers and forced to carry out pig butchering scams. I don't know why the human rights community doesn't use this term, but to me, it's modern-day slavery. All right, I just did a ridiculous walk from the metro to what looks like a kind of industrial part of Taipei. I found Jonas just showed up on his scooter. And the guy we're meeting on Facebook looks like a real gangster.
He is a real gangster. Hello， 嗨，牛大哥，我们在门口这边。对对对，有个31道顶级护理工艺这边吗？有一个雷射刀模。
Jonah's working out the address because we're at a car repainting place. Everything here looks super industrial.
All right, he's gonna be here in 3 minutes.
There are any number of triads and transnational organized criminal groups involved in pig butchering scams and human trafficking. The Bamboo Union is definitely one of them. Here's Jason Tower.
You know, there's been, I think, some reporting that has shown that Bamboo Union seems to have played a role in bringing those individuals in under false pretext to either staff casinos or to trick them with, you know, the promise of high-paying jobs. And that's one area that it seems that Bamboo Union and individuals in Bamboo Union have been playing a role in.
The guy we're meeting, we've been told, has experience in 1990s Cambodia. Is this him in the Mercedes?
Probably.
White Mercedes?
Could be.
The thing is also, the whole thing about, this must be him.
The guy.
The whole thing as well is we're trying to sort of slip in sideways and see if we can find out anything about Haing Ngor and organized crime in Cambodia that might have been around in the 90s.
Our boy just came over with the Mercedes.
It's in the white Mercedes, near the car retouching shop. Now, is this our person?
No, this is I guess this is his
Assistant?
sidekick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because the person on Facebook is sort of a silver fox type.
He's taking us to.
Okay. It turns out the guy in the white Mercedes was an assistant. But he led us to a studio apartment above the car detailing place. This felt like walking into an episode of Law & Order SVU. Jonah pointed out a Yakuza traditional mask on a shelf. The Yakuza are Japanese organized crime. Where should we sit? Down here?
pretty sure they don't speak English, but it just looks exactly like a typical, like a mafia kind of creepy, with this kind of wooden table. Like a lot of Taiwanese traditional game, they would drink tea and, talk about business on a wooden table with tea.
For a few minutes, we chatted and drank tea with the assistant. Then in walked Wing Li. That's not his real name. I've changed it for Jonah's protection. So what made you join Bamboo Union?
那您怎么当初会想要加入竹联帮？
也是那时候怎么讲呢？小时候爱玩。
At 54 years old, Wing Li had been in the Bamboo Union since he was 10. Typical, he says, for kids from his neighborhood. He looks the part of a gangster, well-groomed with dark designer clothes and trendy hair. Wing is the head of a tong. In his case, that's a smaller chapter within the triad. So it's important to know that the word tong has different meanings. Some tongs are simply community organizations that exist in Chinatowns all over the world. But in Wing's case, tong refers to a faction within the Bamboo Union. Wing Li was absolutely charming, just like the Bamboo Union OGs I met. He seemed genuinely interested in helping me out with information. Among his legitimate businesses is a string of karaoke bars. Karaoke is massively popular in Asia. He steered clear of talking about any illicit business and described Bamboo Union more along the lines of a fraternity.
一开始是我一个结拜弟弟，他是澳洲的律师，然后他人在澳洲，他打电话。
Lee said he had no association with Cambodia, but a Bamboo Union brother in Australia called him up. He needed help. 2 Taiwanese were being held at a cyber scam center in Cambodia's coastal city of Sihanoukville. So Wing Li called up a Chinese general he knows, who's working in Cambodia as a military advisor and whose name he would not share. What followed was an elaborate series of phone calls and FaceTimes between Wing Li, the Chinese general, and 2 Bamboo Union members who were based in Cambodia. They went to the compound.
就当初那时候是2个人，2个年轻人，20几岁的。
Okay, so at the beginning, they bribed the guard, and so the Bamboo Union's members that his friends went into the compound and talked to to ask the scammers to let all these Taiwanese people go. There was 2 victims just sitting right over there in front of all the scammers, and the scammers were talking to his Bamboo Union's friends, asking how much money they should pay to get the Taiwanese people back.
Right. I don't know if you caught that, but we've just walked through the looking glass. Bamboo Union member Wing Li worked the phones to help free Taiwanese victims of human trafficking. At the same time, other members of the Bamboo Union are actively tricking young job seekers into human trafficking rings in Cambodia. Here's Jason Tower again. He's about to mention Bai Long. That's Mandarin for White Wolf, one of the Bamboo Union founders I spoke to in the last episode.
I know also, though, and this is interesting, that Bai Long himself has tried to publicly make claims that he's involved in rescuing Taiwanese out of Cambodia. And so perhaps that's in response to some of the public exposés that media have done, which has called out Bamboo Union's role in this form of human trafficking.
You know what that says to me? The good old days are over. I met with both White Wolf and Lu Mao Chun, like Chen Chi Li, they're Bamboo Union original gangsters, the OGs. They describe the triad like an old-fashioned warrior brotherhood, its members defined by absolute loyalty and an honor code. But the group has metastasized since then. It's a question I put to Wing Li. So the one thing I'm confused about is if you read the human rights groups and the U.S. State Department and government reports, they say the Bamboo Union is the one taking people to Cambodia for the cyber scam centers, but you and Chung and Lo say the Bamboo Union are the ones rescuing.
所以这个导演其实有点好奇，就是想说，
其实我跟你讲啊，坦白讲啊，卖人的竹联帮也有。
So Bamboo Unions has a lot of different fractions and tongues. So some of the Bamboo Unions, they sold Taiwanese to Cambodia. That's true. And also, but bamboo unions is such a big group. Me and the White Wolf, we don't necessarily know all the bamboo unions members. So some of them are doing some bad thing, like low key, that we didn't know. So, but like me and White Wolf, we are the good bamboo unions members. So we decided to go to Cambodia and save all these people back to Taiwan.
Now here's a fact that blows my mind. When I was in Cambodia in the 1990s, its GDP was $2.92 billion, according to the U.S. State Department. Its brand new government was heavily reliant on foreign aid. Now, Cambodia's GDP is an estimated $50 billion a year, and 40% of it is generated by pig butchering and other cyber scams, according to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. 40% of GDP. That is an absolutely staggering statistic. Here's Jason Tower.
So if you think about it, I mean, they've become so entrenched that the mainstay of the economy, it's no longer natural resources, it's now a scam economy. And then you get into this vicious cycle where, elites sort of see that this is the mainstay of the economy. So if anything happens to that, there's so many sort of personal interests at stake. Really the whole trajectory of the country's development has been hijacked by these criminal actors, almost to the point where you wonder who's actually really running the country.
Cambodia is now described in foreign policy circles as a mafia state or a state-abetted criminal hub bordering on full state capture by organized crime. And as someone who can remember Cambodia in the early 1990s, when, after decades of bloodshed, including the sadism of the Khmer Rouge years, when it formed its first ever democratically elected government, midwifed by the UN, that period that was so hopeful, when ordinary people genuinely believed that their country could emerge from the darkness, I find this all tremendously sad. We left the interview and went for a coffee. First, Jonah pretty much inhaled a quick cigarette. As a translator, Jonah felt Wing Lee's shadiness much more. I enjoyed a protective layer by simply not understanding Mandarin.
Yeah, so that person is definitely very shady. Like, he's talking in a way that, I don't know, it just made me kind of nervous. They just like all the typical gangsters, like, they seem to be nice, but when
he
they
definitely
talk,
he looked like someone out of Central Casting. He really, if you had to invent a gangster, that you'd come up, like if ChatGPT made a gangster, it would look
that's
like
him. That's him. He's a typical like classic gangster.
But he was very polite. Do you believe him when he denied not knowing enough about gangs and things like that?
I think, yeah, definitely. He definitely made up some, but like he's just trying to make you feel like, oh, you believe him. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Overall, I was disappointed. We'd thought we'd be interviewing someone with experience in Cambodia who'd know about bamboo union operations in the 1990s. But it turned out Wing Lee only worked the phones, and his experience in Cambodia was about pig butchering, a much more recent phenomenon. Wing Lee promised to let us know if he could connect us to a bamboo union member based in Phnom Penh during Haing Ngor's time frame, but Jonah was never able to connect with him again. It turns out we were right to be skeptical of Wing Lee's Boy Scout image. Jonah later found some reports in the Chinese language press of a 2012 arrest. He allegedly dealt ketamine to junior high school students, using their addictions to recruit them into his bamboo union tong. We could not find any updates on whether or not he was convicted. That's all quite grim. This trip has been a roller coaster. But where does that leave us with Haing Ngor? My idea of using the Henry Liu assassination to pivot to Cambodia isn't quite working out. White Wolf, Lu Mao Chuan, and my other interviewees simply didn't know anything about it. I'm not even getting any hints that the Liu assassination was seen as something that could be opportunistically repeated. It's mythologized for sure, but more as a one-off event. Neither White Wolf nor Lu Mao Chuan recognized photos I showed them of Larry. The Bamboo Union was linked to loan sharking, debt collection, and grassroots money laundering in Phnom Penh at the time when Ngor was in financial turmoil. But that's as close as I've gotten. I haven't been able to find any Bamboo Union members with 1990s Cambodia experience. I kept going over my research. Ngor had his Taiwan connections. He'd visited Taipei in 1985 for the local premiere of The Killing Fields. It was just a few weeks after his Academy Award win for playing New York Times reporter Dith Pran. That's when the penny drops. I was looking through the wrong lens. Haing Ngor was an actor. He made movies with Taiwanese and Hong Kong Chinese filmmakers. And something Professor Chiang-Ping Wu said suddenly stands out a lot more.
A lot of people in the entertainment industry, they are part of organized crime as well. It's essentially under gang control.
It's not Henry Liu that links Haing Ngor to the Bamboo Union. It's the film industry. That's coming up in my next episode of Who Killed Haing Ngor. My name is Patricia Noonan, and this is Who Killed Haing Ngor. If you'd like to contribute to the investigation or just have a story to share about Haing Ngor, please reach out on whokilledhaingnor@gmail.com. I'm on Telegram as MP Noonan. If you'd like to support the investigation, there's a donation button on the webpage. Thank you for listening.